Hola, bienvenidos toda la gente a este programa. I am your host, Francisco Frank Garcia, El Segundo, the Black Latin Prince, president and founder of the original Historical Music Society of Detroit. And today we have D.Etta Wilcoxon, who's publisher emeritus of the Renaissance Observer. D.Etta, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
Tell us a little bit about how you became a publisher of your own newspaper.
Well, I've always enjoyed writing since early childhood, and I entered into a business venture with a friend of mine about 15 months ago, and one of the things that we started talking about was a paper. He had done a number of papers in a number of cities, and with my love of writing, I decided to put together the format that ultimately ended up being the Renaissance Observer.
Get the name from?
The Renaissance Observer?
Right.
I was just thinking through names that would be descriptive of a rebirth, provide a catalyst, more or less, in the city to indicate to folk that there were some people out in the city that were thinking along the line of incorporating all that was good about us, and the paper was an avenue for that.
So would you say that the name was actually the precursor to the content or the type of format that you're using in the new paper?
Well, certainly. We gear all of our print toward rebirth, toward as positive a spin as we can put on things. Of course, we're professionals at what we do, and we believe in objectivity, but certainly we try to make certain that we put as positive a spin on every story that we print that we can.
So the content of the paper is geared for a particular segment of the community, every segment of the community, or who do you have in mind?
We try to target the entire community, but certainly we think that there are some needs that are fulfilled more than others. And looking at the paper as a venue for filling a need, we want to make certain that our children and their thought processes are incorporated in the paper. We've started out with the idea that we should be talking about African American history 12 months out of the year instead of one. We certainly do not think that it has had the prominence in our community that it ought to have had. So again, this paper was an avenue to say to folk, yes, let's celebrate African American history 12 months out of the year. Let's celebrate all of the bright stars in our community every time we publish a paper. So it just worked out as being a wonderful avenue for bringing some positive tones to the city.
Have you seen any direct positive results of the paper being published and circulated through the city of Detroit, the greater metropolitan area?
Get calls all the time, emails all the time. It's really been an exciting undertaking. A few months ago, I got a call from a woman out of Fort Wayne, Indiana, who also had an office in Atlanta, and she said she had been in Detroit on a speaking engagement. Her name is Rhonda White. She is a motivational speaker who has worked very closely with Les Brown, and she and I played telephone tag for a couple months. We finally talked. We talked for about 3 hours. We bonded over the phone, and she said, I would love to write for the paper. So the upcoming edition of the Renaissance Observer will feature Rhonda White as a motivational speaker. I got a call last month from Toledo, Ohio, University of Toledo, and I thought, whew, we're in Ohio? So I called the young lady back, and she said, I'm secretary to Ken Dobson, who used to be a part of the Detroit Economic Development Department, I believe, here, responsible for some very big development projects. So I called the young lady back, and I said, well, how did you hear about the Renaissance Observer? And she said, well, Mr. Dobson received this prestigious award in Chicago, and he said, call the Detroit Free Press, the News, Crane's Business, the Michigan Chronicle, and the Renaissance Observer. And I said, really? So it was really exciting to know that folk are ranking us with the major dailies, and they are calling us, wanting us to tell their story. It's just been a wonderful undertaking.
So do you accept articles submitted by individuals?
We accept articles that are submitted to us by individuals, by organizations. It really doesn't matter where the article comes from, as long as it is current news, or even if it's news from a historical perspective, we also want to share that. As long as we can take the material that's submitted to us and it passes muster with the editorial board, we are very interested in printing it. It was interesting, too. am very interested in the thought processes of a number of people across the country, Tavis Smiley being one of those people. I'm just amazed by him and his intellectual astuteness. I emailed Tavis, share some viewpoints that I think are very important to the community, and we'd like very much to have you write a column in the paper so that you share your viewpoints with our 65,000 plus readers. Well, I got an email back indicating that Mr. Smiley was busy on a book tour and lecturing around the country and, of course, producing his own show. But being the Alabamian that I am, we are big on persistence, and we're very big on sit-ins and that kind of thing. So I said, I should write Mr. Smiley directly. So I sat down at the computer, picked out a letter to him, and sent him about 4 editions of the paper. He sent me back a hand-scribed note, congratulations, looking forward to big things happening, wish we could participate now. We can't, but we'll certainly keep the paper in mind. I was really impressed by that. So I do think that the paper can be used as an avenue to say some community. There are positive things out there. And I was even more impressed when I researched an article for this upcoming edition on Mr. Johnson of Johnson Publications. I had no idea that his thought processes and my thought processes paralleled each other to the extent that they did. Of course, he was very interested in making certain that people of color had an opportunity to think of themselves in a positive light. We had not been positively displayed in any other medium, and he used Jet Magazine, Ebony Magazine, and I believe it was the Negro Digest was his first publication, as an opportunity to say to African Americans, you look good, you're doing great things, we want to share what it is you're doing, and black folk bought into it line, hook, and sinker, and the rest is history. So we're using the paper from the same vantage point to say that there are some positive stories in our community. One of the stories in our last edition had to do with a young lady that I met crossing the street. Beautiful, beautiful black baby with gorgeous puffy black hair and gorgeous dark skin. I followed her in my car, and I ended up writing an article on her. Today I met a princess. Very, very exciting kind of thing that we can incorporate in the paper and do incorporate.
That sounds fascinating. So you can honestly say that the paper has been used to educate as well as to uplift people in communities' lives by supplying them with the knowledge of their own history as well as current opportunities that are available to them.
Interesting that you mentioned education. One of our readers took one of our papers over to university, and one of the parents happened to have been an administrator at Schultz Elementary. She took the paper back to school. The assistant principal called me and said, can we get on your distribution list? So we started dropping the paper at Schultz Elementary. Subsequently, the school adopted me. They had a keynote speaker at their first annual volunteer day. They've had me over for a kindergarten tea. I wrote an article on their bike safety program, and I got a call from them last week saying that they are the first school in the Detroit public school system to get its own website. They had had a number of conversations with me regarding their efforts to get a website, but they now have one that is up and functioning. So it's really, really been a wonderful undertaking, and people have reached out for us, embraced us. We're working now to build our advertising base so that we make certain that we are able to provide quality reading, which is something that we certainly are going to be about the business of.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've been speaking with D.Etta Wilcoxon, who is the publisher emeritus of the National Renaissance Observer. And D.Etta, we thank you so much for having been on our program, and we look forward to having you back again real soon.
Thank you so much. I certainly appreciate you having me.